What is the best way to choose a contractor to come in and do work in your home or on your project? Tough question, but we have the right man for the job this week to answer it on the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast. Jodi Perpelitz, a well-known plumber in Saskatoon, is going to come on and help us understand what we should be looking for when we have tradespeople come into our home to do work. Hope you enjoy.
This is the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast, the show that highlights Saskatchewan real estate. Looking to buy your first house, your next investment property? Subscribe to never miss an episode. Here's your host, Ron Caroni.
Hello and welcome back to the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Ron Caroni. Here on the podcast, every single week, we love to touch on things about Saskatchewan real estate and helping Saskatchewan homeowners better understand their house. If you're looking for more information just like this, do us a favor, hit the like and subscribe button. And to help me today to discuss a really important topic that I think a lot of homeowners struggle with, I have Jodi Perpelitz. He is the owner and operator of Shoreline Plumbing and Heating here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. A really good friend. I've known Jodi for around 2 years, and I can say one of the best tradies that I know. And I thought it would be great, Jodi, to sit down and have a discussion about how to choose the right tradesperson. So first off, thank you so much for coming and doing the interview today.
Thanks very much for having me, Ron. Excited to take part in this.
Excellent.
Asked me.
Before we get into the nuts and bolts of how someone is going to find the perfect tradesperson, let's get into a little bit of your extensive background. So just tell us about a little bit about yourself, Jodi, and Shoreline Plumbing and Heating.
Okay. I got started actually in Saskatoon. It would have been 2003 we actually started here, and I operated here for on my own for about 4 or 5 years as far as running the business was concerned. And then we moved up to Goodswell, Saskatchewan, and I operated my business up there. And we ran up there for about 13 years. And in 2019, we moved back to Saskatoon, just age of kids and stuff like that. So we ended up back in Saskatoon here. And I'm a second generation plumber. So I started with family when I was 13. So I'm over 30 years now in the mechanical industry. So yeah, I kind of stuck with it, enjoyed it. So that's about it.
Awesome. As the kids would say, you've done and seen it all. I'm sure there's not too many things that you haven't come across in your time in the plumbing industry.
Well, you run into things. There's still surprises. It's a learning process every day. It's like any other business.
Awesome. What I really wanted to go over today, Jodi, is to give the average person some knowledge and some weapons that they can take into their home renovation process and really kind of go over what someone should be looking for when we are hiring a tradesperson. So not specifically like a plumber or electrician, but some general guidelines that someone can look at when you're inviting someone to do something in your house. So let's start it off with, can you list off a few of the things that you should watch out for that signals that you're dealing with an unprofessional tradesperson or maybe the wrong person for your job?
Well, I think a lot of times you can tell if people are professional right out of the gate. If they don't carry themselves well, a lot of times, I would say be cautious. Usually people have a pretty good sense. I think the best thing with tradesmen, I would say, if someone is insisting on being paid cash, that's a red flag. Always be cautious with people that are looking to be paid cash for something, and I think that's kind of across the board in a lot of industries. If people aren't able to produce permits, you should always kind of, push to try to get permits if it requires, Again, you should educate yourself a little bit on whatever it is you're doing. Like I hate to push the YouTube thing, but you should YouTube a little bit about what you're doing, and know a little bit about what you're expecting from your trades before you start phoning trades. I know sometimes we're phoning trades in an emergency situation. A lot of my work is reactive, but so reputation. Is a big thing. WCB on larger projects, you can always get a hold of WCB. There's
Workers' Compensation Board for
compensation. Yeah. So you can always get a hold of them, and you'll always be able to find out if someone is registered with them, and you want people to be registered before they're working in your home on any construction projects, definitely. So that's definitely one thing.
All right, Jodi, I just wanted to quickly go back to something that you touched on in your last answer there. You were talking about permits. Can you walk us through the importance of that permits, where they come from, and why that's something that a homeowner should be really cautious of?
Well, a lot of the work that we do does require permits, and gas inspections, any additions to your house. There's very specific permits that we need to put in place for different things, and it all ties back to insurance. So with permits and stuff like that, if contractors aren't able to provide you the permits or pulled permits, it's probably likely that they aren't actually insured properly in order to be doing what they're doing. Also, the permits will protect the contractor as much as they protect the homeowner. So if there is an issue somewhere down the road, if the permits and inspections have been done properly, it makes everything a lot easier when it comes down to insurance, because everything comes back to insurance for the most part.
Can you give me either a real example of that, Jodi, or a story that you've heard, or exactly what that would look? Let's say, like, if someone were to do electrical work, can you walk us through how that would look in a specific scenario?
Well, we'll say in plumbing, say I came into somebody's house and we did a renovation and a bathroom addition, and we did a bunch of work and we added on a bathroom, and later on down the road, for some reason, whether it be a failure in the equipment or maybe even I wouldn't go poor installation, but if something happens and a flood happens, if we didn't pull the proper permits and didn't have everything in place and didn't do everything properly, and there was a flood, it would cause a lot of problems for the homeowner to deal with that issue. In the end, it ends up turning into a legal battle, but if everything's done properly, things go a lot smoother. Not saying you won't get insurance. That end of things, I'd actually have to talk to an insurance person directly about to get details on that, because it depends on your provider. But you definitely want to make sure that everything is in place.
Wonderful. So that gives us a really good background of the things that we should look for. Is there anything specifically that if you were to see a tradesperson, I know a lot of this will kind of be inverse of what you'd previously mentioned, but are there some specific points to know that you're dealing with the right contractor, the right tradesperson for the job?
Very detailed quotes, very upfront about everything. Usually if you got a very detailed quote, very upfront, are out on social media, are very easy to get a hold of, very easy to Google and find, Google reviews, stuff like that are good. Being able to, you can actually get a hold of the city too, if you need to, just to see if they have a business license, because there's a lot of things that have to be in place, before you can become a contractor in the city of Saskatoon specifically. But so those kinds of things.
I know we've talked about this off air, and I did want to kind of touch on it here. The importance of someone being insured while they're in your house. Can you talk about what that is and how that pertains to a homeowner's risk when you have a stranger who's doing work in your house?
Yeah, that comes back to workers' compensation. And if a contractor is working in your house and they hurt themselves somewhere in your house, they fall on something or trip on something or they hurt themselves, if they're not covered by workers' compensation, I think they can basically come after you as the homeowner, or as the contractor or builder, or so workers' compensation is put in place to protect both the worker and the homeowner. So it's basically to protect everybody involved. And it is a good way, like I said before, it's a really good way to find out if you're dealing with a legitimate contractor, because if they're not legitimate, they're not going to have these things in place. Like
What are the questions that I'm asking, Jodi, to make sure that someone has that in place? Am I asking them if they're connected to the Workers' Compensation Board, or am I simply asking them or asking for proof and is verbal enough, or am I going to need to see documentation? What steps should a homeowner take in that case?
Well, with bigger builders or with larger contracts, you can actually request a record of good standing from workers' compensation, and that can be given at any time. I can, as a contractor, I can just go on the website, and if I am in good standing, I can just print off the form, or they'll email me the form and I can print it off and I can prove that I'm in good standing. So it's very easy for people to get that information if you want it. 9 times out of 10, if they're legitimate, they're out there, they're, you see they're advertising, they have social media, they have websites, they have all of these things. These people, are usually going to be, they're usually going to be licensed and insured, and everything's going to be done properly.
The right contractor is going to know what to show you if you're kind of looking for those details.
Yeah, and they're going to be they're going to know what to show you. They're going to know how to talk to you. They're going to be able to give you documentation. They're going to be able to tell you what the permits are going to cost, what's going to be required of them. They're not going to hesitate to give you that information. They should be giving you copies of the permits. When permits are supposed to be pulled before work starts. A lot of people don't know that, but technically before the work starts, you should have your permits in place. If the work requires permits, and a lot of work does, a lot of work does require permits. So
wonderful. I think you could almost sum that all up with a professional, someone who understands their work, understands the cost, and understands how to do business. And I think a lot of that could be encompassed by that. And I think that kind of leads into our next question here. A lot of people want jobs done cheap, fast, and at a really good price. And I think it's really interesting to kind of go into this dynamic. And I think I heard one gentleman on a podcast one time say you can have one of 3 things when getting work done. You can have, 2 of 3 things. You can have it done cheap and fast, cheap and good, or fast and good. But you can only have 2 of those because they often don't all align. I think I said that correctly. But if we're going to ask, what is the best way for a homeowner to know how to get the best price when they are getting a job done? Because no one wants to spend more money than they have to, but a lot of people do want the job to be done well at the end. Do you have any tips on how someone can approach quoting contractors?
Well, every contractor is going to have a different price for different things, and you could get 3 or 4 different contractors in, and you should on larger projects. You should get multiple quotes every time, and everybody's going to be different because within the code requirements, there's all kinds of different ways that we can install stuff into people's houses. There's different quality of materials, there's different, all of that. So the best thing you can do is be very, very specific about what you want. If you're looking for the best price, if that's what your goal is, be very, very specific about what you want so that the people that are bidding are all bidding apples to apples. That's one of the biggest challenges in my trade, is bidding apples to apples against people, because there is a very big difference. There can be a very big difference in quality. Another thing is, whether you've got journeyman people working in your house or apprentices. Is it journeyman people coming into the home, or is it apprentices? That's another thing when it comes down to estimating. So there's a balance for that as well too. So if you want to get, that would be my advice, probably would be, is the more specific you can be about what you want, the better and more accurate the pricing is going to be from the contractors that you're looking for. So again, if you want it done fast and good, it's going to be expensive, because that's hard to do. That's committing a lot of time and a lot of resources to get it done. So it's true. You only get 2 of the 3. That's how that goes.
I think I messed up the 3, but
I think you might have. But
I think people can understand what I was trying to go for there.
Yeah.
I wanted to quickly touch on it because I think it was really good to have a detailed explanation of kind of what you want. I think that kind of goes back to what you'd said earlier, is that as a consumer, there also needs to be some self-education, whether you're watching a YouTube video, whether you're touching base with a few contractors, and having a really good idea of what you're wanting and the timeline of when you expect things to be done. And that might be really good to have all of that upfront in paper when you are having a disagreement, perhaps with your contractor.
Yeah, and have a written contract. and review that contract all the way through the project. Make sure the contract's very detailed. I would make sure that the contract is signed to protect both the contractor and the homeowner. This maybe isn't required in every case, and lots of times you can do things verbally. A lot of my contracts are verbally, like to change a set of taps or do something like that. But in larger projects and in housing and everything else, it's very important to have a detailed contract and make sure that you're happy with what is being provided before you sign the contract. That's probably one of the most important things, and that's something we always focused on, was making sure that our contracts and our quotes were extremely detailed. And that process, we go through a lot of work on that process to make sure that everybody understands what is included and what is not. So
yeah, and that has to lead to happier customers, because if you get the service that you wanted on time and on budget, that's really what everyone is looking for when you kind of enter into a process like that.
Yeah, and there's always bumps along the way. There's going to be disagreements, and there's going to be challenges along the way, especially when you get into renovating. Like, that happens, and that's why we have those agreements. If it's outside of the scope or it's some kind of a surprise, don't ever always leave yourself room in your budget. If you do have a budget when you're getting these quotes, always realize that there's going to be extra costs. Like, it's very rare that everything is set in stone and things go completely perfectly all the way through. It does happen, but it's rare. So always leave yourself a little bit, just in case.
Wonderful. Yeah. I wanted to quickly touch on this while I had you here on the interview, Jodi. What struggles are you seeing right now for contractors, and do you see it getting any better with the supply of goods and things that you need to do your job? And I'll kind of trust you to maybe try and speak on this on a very general basis. How hard is it for people to source materials, and what can people expect from timelines of getting things done? And does that tie into supply chain of products that are available?
Yeah, it does. It is getting more difficult in some areas to get products, and I think it's going to continue with some. I'm assuming it has to do with things in the United States, because a lot of our stuff comes from the United States. A lot of our materials and stuff are manufactured in the United States. So we are seeing a lot of shortages. We see a lot of delays when it comes to things like acrylic or tubs, stuff like that. So I would make sure when you're looking at your timelines to allow more time than usual. And most builders are doing this already. And most contracts actually will have this written in that, more time may be needed in order to gather some of these materials. And I've been finding the more extravagant you get, the longer it's taking to get stuff. Not all the time, but I've been finding with the stuff that we've been trying to source, that's what we're running into. So the lead times on everything are going up. I don't think this is going to improve. I think we're going to have to start leaving more and more time. As a contractor, what I try to do is stock a little bit more so that I do have some of this equipment on hand. And I know most people will do that. Most builders will do that, but in the grand scheme of things, when you start ordering, I would definitely allow for that.
Really great. And probably not what people want to hear, but an important factor if you're planning that renovation to allow yourself a little bit of that mental time to adjust for that. Last question.
Or order ahead of time. Yeah. Sorry, Ron. Or make sure that you're ordering way ahead of time. You know what I mean? When you start your planning process, don't leave yourself 2 weeks to get all of your plumbing fixtures. Order your plumbing fixtures or whatever fixtures, order them 8 to 12 weeks in advance. Like, make sure you're giving yourself a lot of time, store them somewhere. If it's important that you have the stuff, store them somewhere if you can. But yeah, that would be the best way to deal with that. And that's how we're dealing with a lot of this now, is ordering way in advance.
Second last word to you here, Jodi. Is there any other tips, tricks, advice you would give to someone who is looking for a contractor, doing renovation, finding a tradesperson? Any other points to add there?
Talk to people. Talk to people that have had renovations done. Talk to family members. Talk to your friends. You know what I mean? Find out who they've used, if they've had good luck, if they haven't had good luck. There's a lot of organizations out there that are networking organizations that you could probably look into. So, you know, one like BNI, Ron and I are both members of that. So I don't know if we can bring that up or not, but, you know, so there's a lot of, there's lots of ways. But again, like professionals, having websites, having everything in place, having, you know, having Facebook reviews, you know, making sure that these places are putting themselves out there and are easily accessible. At least then, you know, they are legitimate. They're trying and they're legitimate. You know, if they don't have any logos on their vans and you can only get hold of them by cell between 9 o'clock and 4 o'clock, then, you know, that might be a red flag.
Sounds good. Awesome. Thanks for all of that great information, Jodi. And we'll ask you for one more piece of wisdom. What advice would you give to a younger version of yourself if you could go back and have a chat with young Jodi?
I would say when you start a business, the first thing you should do is start taking some business training. Start taking training in business, not in your trade. You've done your trade, you know your trade. If you want to go into business, the first thing is take some business training. And the second thing is start networking. Whether you do it on your own or through a networking group, those are the two things that I would recommend above all else is training and networking.
Awesome. Really like it, Jodi. Thank you so much for joining us today. If someone does have a need for some plumbing advice, or they have a job in the Saskatoon area that they'd like you to take a look at, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
We are online. Anyone could find us basically at shorelinesk.ca. That's our website. And we're also on Facebook and Google and everything. So we're pretty easy to find. And we've been around a while. So that's the best way to get a hold of us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jodi, for coming on today. I really appreciate this topic because I think it's something that everyone has struggled with and will struggle with at some point, whether you're renting, whether you own. Knowing good tradespeople and knowing how to find them is something that is almost a life skill, one of those things you won't learn in school. So I really appreciate your time and your input on this topic.
Thanks for having me, Ron.
Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast. If you like this episode and found some value, make sure to hit the like button. If you are looking for more content just like this, we air episodes every single Monday. So hit the subscribe button to never miss a show. If you're looking for more details on how to buy, refinance, or renew a mortgage in Saskatchewan, I would be happy to walk you through those details. Simply book a Calendly link with me and we can go from there. Details on that are in the description of this video or audio podcast. My name is Ron Caroni, your Saskatchewan mortgage professional. Until next week, bye for now.